What are the best and worst matchups for fantasy football from the early games in week number 2, starting with Thursday night football between the Chargers and Chiefs? Who should you start and sit? It's time to break it down right here and right now. We should start looking at the games on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. We've looked at the waiver wire already for week 2, so that means we're going to turn the page and start breaking down the matchups. Yep, it's already Wednesday this week. We're going to kick it off with our first official Thursday night football game there on Amazon Prime Video between the Chargers and Chiefs. So starting the fantasy football week with a bang here with 2 explosive offenses. So we'll break that game down for you here on LOFF. Then we'll get into 7 more games at an early part of the schedule that are on Sunday. So pack slate again, no bye weeks are ready here for us. So we're going to lock and load here and try to get some better results, even if we won in week number 1 to really go forward here with our fantasy football season-long leagues. So looking forward to that. We'll break that down for you right away in a moment. But first, I have to tell you, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/Locked On NFL. All right, let's dive right into the games here, folks. We have the aforementioned Chargers-Chiefs game. The Chiefs are in Arrowhead Stadium. They're the hosts for this game. The spread is 4 in their favor. This is the highest point total of the week in the first game. 54.5 here is what most books have this at. So we're expecting a lot of points. Yeah, the implied total is pretty high for both teams. Let's start with the visiting Chargers. Justin Herbert, locked and loaded here. He'll be without Keenan Allen. It's a hamstring injury. He's been ruled out. It's a short week. So Allen already facing a little attrition in his age 30 season. So that opens up the opportunity for others. Mike Williams, who disappeared against the Raiders in week 1, should be fired up here as the number 1 receiver. The Chiefs secondary has some transition here without Tyrann Mathieu. They lost Charvarius Ward as well. So in a bit of transition, we had Marquise Hollywood-Brown produced late in the game there and Greg Dortch there for the Cardinals. And we know the Chargers have much better receivers here, not only with Mike Williams, but now Joshua Palmer should have a bigger role. He was very limited there in the first game when Allen was in there and then got hurt. They went to DeAndre Carter, but I think they'll plan a little bit better for Palmer to have a bigger role here. So if you're in a deeper league and need a wide receiver 3, you can look at Palmer, but Mike Williams definitely slides up. He's going to eat up the targets here for sure without Allen, and the tight ends also come into play here. So it changes the game a little bit where you have Allen out, so you have to slide in and find a short to intermediate receiver. Gerald Everett looked very good in his debut there. We know that Zach Ertz scored on the Chiefs. The Chiefs still pretty vulnerable in covering the tight end. So I like Gerald Everett again as a good streaming option this week. It looks like he's going to be a key part of what they do. We know Justin Herbert has also talked up Joshua Palmer. So that receiving core there, definitely some values to be had. Don't worry, Mike Williams will come back and have a nice game here for you this week. He has to here, as this game should go pretty high scoring for the Chargers and Chiefs. Now, Austin Eckler is in your lineup every week. He's a Chiefs killer. He's the type of player that really drives them nuts because he runs well, he catches the ball well. There, James Conner scored there against the Chiefs. So Chiefs still pretty vulnerable against the run. So really like Eckler this week there to get you the results you're looking for. It was a little bit of a modest week for Eckler in week 1 against the Raiders. We thought we were going to get a lot more out of him, but I think you'll get that here in the short week against the Chiefs. So your principles there are definitely Eckler, Williams, and Herbert. You're going to extend, if you need to Palmer. And Herbert is definitely going to look at Everett. So he's a top 12 play to me this week, Gerald Everett. Just the tight end landscape is shaky at this point. So that you look at him. Can't play the Chargers defense. I know they had a big first game with Khalil Mack. There's a chance that J.C. Jackson returns. I would say he's questionable at best for this at corner, but you can't play defense against Patrick Mahomes. It just is not going to happen here in week 2. Now, on the other side, Patrick Mahomes, it's a little bit tougher than what he saw from the Cardinals last week. This Chargers secondary, even without Jackson, is very tough. You got Bryce Callahan in the slot, so that could be a little bit tough for Juju, but they could move him around on the outside. You also have Asante Samuel Jr., who's a very good corner as well. So I wouldn't extend too much. I think you have to go Juju because he's clearly the target that's going to get the most looks. But Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman. Hardman was touchdown dependent. Moore was one big play guy there in week 1. So really, you can't really extend in this receiving core behind Juju Smith-Schuster. But don't expect a lot from Smith-Schuster. I think you're looking at wide receiver 3 value if Callahan is matched up. Callahan did shut up and shut down Hunter Renfrow last week for the Raiders. Different type of slot receiver, though. Smith-Schuster, a little bit big slot type player. So that might help him a little bit produce in this game. But there's going to be volume for sure. Travis Kelce, he's clearly the number 1 target. He's rolling here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire looks like he's going to be a big part of this pass game all over the field. So he is an RB2 with RB1 upside this week. And yeah, Mahomes, I'm going to downgrade a little bit because the Chargers defense, it's not going to be as easy pickings as it was against the Cardinals, but he's still an awesome play this week. Here, I say Herbert has a little bit better matchup, but Mahomes is Mahomes, and you roll with him this week. So really sticking with the easy ones are Kelce, CEH, a little bit of Juju if you need him, Mahomes for sure, and we're not touching the Chiefs defense at all in this game. And then the kickers, if you need Dustin Hopkins and Harrison Butker for sure, you can attach to this game with a high point total in this one. I do like the Chiefs to win. They're at home, and Arrowhead is a tough place to play on a short week for the Chargers, but I would expect it to be that back and forth here. And we'll go to the next game here. So the Panthers are playing the Giants, so a little bit of Matt Rule revenge game. It's really the kind of the Giants organization has borrowed a little bit from the Bills with Brian Dable and their GM Joe Shane, which was an extension of the Panthers. So a lot of connections here. Dave Gettleman was once the GM of both teams. So weird connections between the Panthers and Giants. On the field, however, let's look at them from a fantasy football perspective. 2.5. That's the point total in favor of the Giants, who shocked the Titans, came back late and won that game there with a late rally. And the Panthers lost in shocking fashion. They had a long field goal made against them to win the game by the Browns. The Giants had a long field goal missed against them. So a little bit of different scenarios here. I actually do like the Panthers to win this game on the road outright. You look at what their outcomes from last week. Baker Mayfield started going in the second half. This is a defense that I think Baker Mayfield can exploit. I think you'll see a correction to get DJ Moore involved. He was a little bit quiet. I think the Giants can contain the big play a little bit, but I do like DJ Moore quite a bit in this game with Baker Mayfield. A sneaky snack and stack in DFS to take a bite out of your scoring this week for sure with those two guys. So Baker Mayfield inspired a little bit in that second half of that game. I think you'll see Christian McCaffrey being a lot more effective in this one. The Giants did contain Derrick Henry quite a bit last week, but what do they struggle with? Stopping Dontrell Hilliard in the passing game. So I could see a big receiving game for McCaffrey, even if it's a limited rushing game. But he has to get back on track. He did get a touchdown last week against the Browns, but we want to see a lot more than that. He's a high first-round pick. We want to see this CMC that we're used to. And I think we'll see a little bit more of that via the pass catching this week, and he's going to help Mayfield put up those numbers as well as more. Now, I have a dart throw on Robbie Anderson. He's a tournament play only to me here. In deep leagues, it's hard to trust on him because he could have one catch for 7 yards, or he could have one catch for 85 yards on a touchdown. You don't know what you're going to get. But I think it's a DJ Moore game, a McCaffrey game, and the passing game, and that's going to help Mayfield here play. You can't extend anything else here in this Panthers offense, not looking at Ian Thomas. You could look at the defense, however. It's Daniel Jones on the other side. He can make mistakes. They do have Brian Burns and some guys who can make plays on the back end. So both defenses come into play here. The over-under is only 43, so there are some options here to get some defensive scoring. But I do like Mayfield and the Panthers side a little bit more in this one. For the Giants, said no, I'm not going to go with Daniel Jones. This Panthers defense is still pretty tough. Jacoby Brissett still had to grind to get things going. The thing that they really struggled with, however, was the running game, and Saquon Barkley should be in store for another massive game. You know what Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt did to this Panthers front. They're all about that for Brian Dable running Barkley as much as possible. So I do like the Giants and Barkley in that sense, but receiving core, you can't trust anything. Sterling Shepard looked like the best, but we don't know about Wan'Dale Robinson's knee injury. We also have questionable usage of Kadarius Toney and Kenny Galladay. So you can't go anywhere else. It's really Barkley, 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 smash, smash, smash for this matchup, and you should be force-fed the ball. And if you need a Giants defense, it's okay, but I much prefer the Panthers defense in this particular matchup. All right, that is a look at our first two games there in the early part of the week 2 schedule for fantasy football. We will get to 6 more games here, and then we'll break down the rest of the schedule, the back 8 games through Sunday Night Football and the Monday Night doubleheader. That'll be on Thursday's show. I told you at the top, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small businesses fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of more than 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills, experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You know, NFL teams are always looking for the right winning combination, and that's why you should too. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, it is time to continue the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football, and we'll look at 3 more matchups here on the early side in the 1 p.m. Eastern Time window here in Week 2. Fantasy football talk, and we're looking at Colts and Jaguars. The Colts are only 4-point favorites in Jacksonville after that ridiculous tie in Houston. They had no business tying the Texans, so they're going to rebound, try to win a game here in the AFC South. They're in first place, kind of the Texans. That record, the Jaguars 0-1, lost a heartbreaker on the road to the Commanders. So 47 is the over-under. Not terrible here, but let's start here. I think it's not a bad spot for Matt Ryan again to stream. If he had 300 yards, you would have liked the multiple touchdowns there against the Texans. It could come this week as the Jaguars offense have shown some signs of life here and could provide some resistance here. So Matt Ryan, again, a decent streamer this week. We need the multiple touchdowns to pay off, however, and that can be tough when you have Michael Pittman Jr. and not much else there, but we're looking at Ryan to deliver this week and get that second score there with some decent volume against the Jaguars. Now, Jonathan Taylor, we don't even have to talk about him. He just had a monster game against the Texans. The Jaguars got destroyed by Antonio Gibson last week, so great spot for Taylor to keep it rolling as the top running back on the board overall and all season long. Michael Pittman has looked awesome as advertised here. He's going to destroy this Jaguars secondary. Struggled with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson last week. So the principles here, Pittman and Taylor, high-end players at their positions. You have also Matt Ryan, a stash that I would look at, not to play necessarily this week, but Kylan Granson. It looks like he's the tight end of choice. They've liked this kid for a while. Here, Mo Cox is there, but Granson is a very good athlete. Alec Pierce, the rookie, struggled a little bit. Paris Campbell trying to get involved in the wideout core. So that could open up the door here for Granson at some point, but I'm not going to deploy him quite yet. But the Pittman and Taylor show continues here in Jacksonville and Duval County. Now we go to the Jaguars on their side. I wouldn't play Trevor Lawrence this week. This Colts defense is pretty tough. They did a number on Davis Mills, contained him last week, so can't go in that direction with the Jags for sure. And Christian Kirk might have a tough matchup. If you have a better option as your wide receiver 3 with some 2 upside, I would go in that direction. Kenny Moore didn't have a great game in week 1, but he's a very good slot corner. That's where Kirk lines up. So I think it'll be maybe more of Zay Jones this week. Evan Ingram could have some value. I mean, the 2 touchdowns did go to O.J. Howard, so I don't know if the Colts will allow that breakdown again, but that's kind of where the weakness of their defense is, not in their cornerbacks or the pass rush. So they can be vulnerable against the tight end, but it's hard to trust Evan Ingram. If you want to go there in a league, you can go there, but I much prefer a play such as Gerald Everett this week there. But Christian Kirk, I'd pump the brakes on if you have a better alternative there with a good matchup that you drafted. You might have that because Kirk was being drafted as a wide receiver before. I'm not banking on him to replace and repeat that Commanders production here because the Commanders way worse in the slot than the Colts are in coverage. In the running back situation, I think you have to play James Robinson as an RB2. Given the volume last week, I think if you're going to play Travis Etienne Jr., just expect flex numbers from him. That's how you're going to look at him this week. But Zay Jones is my sleeper out of this game. He had good targets there on the outside, and I think that's where the Colts are a little bit more vulnerable. But again, I'd prefer to avoid the Jaguars' wideouts and tight ends as much as possible and to stick with the running backs in this game for different purposes depending on the size of your league. You can also look at the Colts defense. I think they'll have a nice rebound game. They actually played pretty well against the Texans overall. Gave up those long touchdowns to O.J. Howard, but otherwise they're a dangerous defense, and they'll be a little bit desperate to put it away here starting 0-1. All right, let's go to Baltimore, where the Dolphins are traveling to the Ravens. The Ravens are only 3.5-point favorites in this game. Makes sense. The Dolphins really owned them on a Thursday night last year. That was with Jacoby Brissett starting there for Tua Tagovailoa, and the Dolphins defense really confused and confounded one Lamar Jackson after the first matchup where, remember, Lamar went nuts in 2019 in the opener with Marquise Brown playing in Miami. This one, however, is in Baltimore. So 44.5. So not expecting a lot here from either team. I'm going to sit Tua Tagovailoa. I'm going to play Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle every week. I mean, they're the lifeblood of this offense. Cedric Wilson's getting a little bit involved, but Mike Gesicki's totally disappeared. So they're in there, but keep in mind this Ravens secondary is pretty tough. So I would expect big games. I mean, it's Hill, so Hill's always in your lineup and is always a wide receiver 1. Waddle, however, might be slowed down a little bit by this secondary. So keep that in mind to fade a little bit. And I wouldn't play Waddle in DFS this week. So looking at it for sure, I look at Hill having a little bit bigger game than Waddle this week. What the Ravens did struggle with, however, against the Jets was the running backs catching passes. Breece Hall was pretty effective there. So Chase Edmonds is a really sneaky play this week to get it done with receiving. I wouldn't trust him to run all that well against the Ravens. So I'm looking at Raheem Mostert or any kind of power running situation. But Edmonds, the shorter passes to him may work a little bit better than Waddle this week. Hill, again, might be contained deep, but he's still Hill, and he can always come through here for you. So sit Tagovailoa, but play Hill, Waddle, and Edmonds just temper your expectations for Waddle this week. And no Mike Gesicki. He's off the radar. He shouldn't be on rosters at this point. I would also fade the Dolphins defense. They had a big game against the Patriots, including a defensive touchdown last week, but it's on the road. It's a little bit different. They're not against a rival. The Ravens defense, I think, is an every week play here. They destroyed the Jets last week, and they can get some sacks and turnovers of Tagovailoa. The right tackle for the Dolphins is also hurting Austin Jackson, so we'll see if that comes into play here for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson, just temper expectations a little bit. It was a tough matchup for him last week, for sure, or last season, I should say. He really came through last week against the Jets, another foe from the AFC East. So it'll be good. I think he'll have to get it done a little bit more with running this week. I actually sneakily like Kenyon Drake this week. It's a revenge game for Kenyon Drake. If J.K. Dobbins is out, Drake is going to get a little bit more volume. They're going to try to get the running game going with both Jackson and Drake. I also feel this is a Mark Andrews game. The Dolphins secondary still has Xavier Howard, so I'm going to fade Rashad Bateman. Devin Duvernay didn't get enough looks there. So I think the Ravens are going to go back to their basics here. A lot of running with Jackson and whoever's in there, Drake or Dobbins, and then a lot of Mark Andrews in this one for sure against the Dolphins. So the basics are going to happen. The Ravens, I think, will win this game, and it'll be a little gritty, though, low scoring, so don't have too much exposure to this one in DFS and stick with the principles that you would play in season long. All right, our next matchup that we look at here is the Patriots at the Steelers, and this is not much of a matchup, folks. So we'll see if Mac Jones can play with a back injury. He said he's going to be okay. We'll see what happens with the practice, but really I'm not expecting a lot from the passing game anyway. So I think you might see an overcorrection with Hunter Henry this week, but everything else looks pretty bad here. This receiving core, Devontae Parker, they want to get Kendrick Bourne more involved. Jacoby Myers is not inspiring to play at all. So, and I'm going to fade as much as I can with the Patriots. If you need someone here, I think you look at Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. The Steelers really struggled all purpose with Joe Mixon. So, good 1-2 punch. And by the way, Ty Montgomery is on injured reserve here. So, that really helps where nobody's going to cut into the touches in the passing game. Stevenson Montgomery was a thorn on the side of both of them by scoring a touchdown on the receiving end from Jones. So he's gone out of this mix. So that really helps Harrison Stevenson. And the Steelers' run defense still pretty atrocious here. They also don't have TJ Watt, so that can help Hunter Henry maybe get on routes a little bit more. So running games, again, the correlation between good running game and a blocking tight end usually ends up in numbers. So low end tight end 1 is Henry, but I do like Damian Harris as a nice RB2 and Ramondre Stevenson as an upside RB3 this week in a flex play for sure. Steelers side of things, the Patriots actually favored this game. I actually do like them to win. It's only a 40.5 over under, so yeah. It's pretty ugly. It's actually not the lowest total that we have on the board, and we're actually going to talk about the game in our final segment. But yeah, Najee Harris, look, he's fine. Looks like he's going to play, but we're going to monitor if Jalen Warren's a plug and play this week. He says he's going to play with the foot ankle injury. We're not so sure. We wanted to see it with the practices and make sure he's ready and active before we go with it on Sunday. But if he's in the lineup, he's in there. Just don't be afraid. If he's good to go, then he's good to go for you there in your lineups. But anywhere else, I mean, Pat Freiermuth is being quite a bit involved with Mr. Trubisky. Deontay Johnson, you're playing. He's always reliable as a wide receiver too, just with his usage. But Chase Claypool, George Pickens' downfield passing game, totally non-existent with Mr. Trubisky, and he's supposed to be the strong arm quarterback here. So really disappointing. So I think you look at Harris, Freiermuth, Johnson, the guys that you would look at in general. Freiermuth back in tight end 1. Harris, more of an RB1, RB2 borderline based on this matchup and the usage here in the blocking of Pittsburgh. Mason Cole, the center, is a little bit banged up. And Johnson, you have to right now say he's a wide receiver too until Trubisky can get it going or they make the change to Kenny Pickett, because Pickett can get these wide receivers a little bit more involved for better numbers here. So the Steelers defense, also worthy play here. Even though without Watt, you have Minkah Fitzpatrick and a lot of playmakers there. So both defenses are actually maybe the most appealing, as well as the running backs in this particular contest here, with the quarterbacks and passing games looking very questionable here to start the season on both ends there for the Patriots and Steelers. All right, there you have a look at 3 more games. We'll break it down with 3 more from the 1 p.m. Eastern Time window in our final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football. So a lot of good stuff there that we broken down for you, and not a lot of exciting stuff quite yet. We'll get into it other than the Chargers and Chiefs. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting odds and needs in sports this season. Find all the latest football league developments here, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games and now into week 2. BetOnline is also your convenient source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf, and of course, the NFL. Head to the website today, use a mobile device to learn more about the trends in action only at BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, it is time here to close the show on Locked On Fantasy Football, and we will talk about 3 more matchups. And don't forget, we will break down all the games. They will come in tomorrow's show there. We'll get through the Sunday night game between the Bears and Packers. We'll have the Titans-Bills and the Vikings-Eagles as well. Monday Night Football doubleheader in week 2 this week. It didn't happen in week 1, but it happened in week 2. All right, let's go back to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Jets and Browns. Speaking of Monday Night Football, that was the first Monday Night Football ever there back in the day. Teams have changed a lot since then. The Browns are 6-point favorites. The 1-0 Browns, 6-point favorites at home. 40. Yeah, this is the lowest point total of the week. Even lower than the Patriots-Steelers game. So not a lot in this game. Jets, where are we going with the Jets? Oh, yeah, nowhere. We're not playing anyone. Michael Carter, Breece Hall, that's a mess. Splitting those carries. Now Elijah Moore has to contend with a lot of Corey Davis and Garrett Wilson and a little bit of the tight ends. It's just too much. It's piecemeal. Joe Flacco, Another AFC North reunion game here. He had a revenge game last week against the Ravens. Did not play out well, even though he threw like 50 times with 300 plus yards. Empty. It's empty. So we're not going with the Jets at all this week in any way, shape, or form. Now let's go with the Browns. I'm going to hit the pause button on Amari Cooper. You're obviously not going to play Jacoby Brissett in this one with the 40 over under. The two best plays, obviously, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. You're going to go full speed. You can't really look at David Njoku either. He was the hot, buzzy sleeper going in, but Harrison Bryant has not gone away as a tight end. So Amari Cooper and Njoku, these guys were major disappointments in week one working with Jacoby Brissett. The only guy that has appeal in the passing game when you're looking at Chubb and Hunt and the defense being the surefire players from the round this week is one Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had 11 targets last week, 6 for 60. He's still pretty inefficient there with Brissett starting, but there's definitely a chemistry there. He's the number 2 receiver. Cooper and Brissett just seemed a little bit off here. The Jets secondary gave him some big plays, and Peoples-Jones profiles a little bit like Devin Duvernay and Rashad Bateman, a little bit of speed on the outside. So Peoples-Jones, a little bit sleeper tournament play, deeper leagues here as a wide receiver 3. Do like DPJ, not OBJ, as a play this week. But Browns defense and the running backs, yeah, smash here against the Jets, and smash everything with the Jets defense, shatter it into pieces, and don't get it anywhere near the lineup in week number 2. All right, Buccaneers and Saints. It's a 3-point spread in favor of the visiting Tampa Bay team in New Orleans. And we know that Tom Brady, well documented in play in the NFC South, 0-4 in the regular season against the Saints. He is actually 1-0 in the playoffs, which is more important because it helped them win the Super Bowl 55. So he did outdrew Drew Brees when it counted, but they lost last year without Brees twice. So a little bit shocking. So I think Brady has a little bit of unfinished business in this division. So one thing he hasn't really done, he's won the division, he's won a wild card, but beating the Saints in the regular season hasn't happened. I think it happens this week. When you look at the Buccaneers, however, I'm not going to play Tom Brady. Chris Godwin down with a hamstring injury. I don't love him this week. I think Julio is not a bad little sleeper play, but I don't expect a high volume game from Tom Brady. I think you're looking at 252 is the absolute ceiling. And I do like Mike Evans. I do like Julio Jones as a deeper sleeper here as a wide receiver 3 with Russell Gage kind of faded out of the offense and no Godwin. He's going to be involved. He got some key targets from Brady. So Mike Evans, lock him in as a wide receiver 1. Jones is a nice wide receiver 3. But the guy I like the most here, Leonard Fournette. Now, I looked at the Saints last week. They weren't the same run defense that we're used to. The Falcons really had their way with Cordell Patterson. Patterson, I think, is underrated as being a bigger, stronger guy, and Leonard Fournette is certainly that. The Buccaneers' offensive line banged up again here with Donovan Smith, the left tackle, out. So that's a concern against this pass rushers up front for Dennis Allen, the Saints. So I think the Buccaneers reinventing themselves a little bit, grinding a little bit with Todd Bowles. That's what happens when you go from a wide open passing coach in Bruce Arians to a defensive-minded coach in Bowles. And I think Bowles, that's a good recognition because you don't have Ryan Jensen. You're really hurting up front. These guys can run block a lot easier. You still have Tristan Wirfs, who's very good at doing that. So I think the Buccaneers are going to shift a little bit here. So again, you can't expect a lot of volume in the passing game from Evans and Jones, but I think they're playable this week. And 44 tells you that you don't want to attach yourself too much to this game there with the defenses on the field. So I do love the Buccaneers defense and Fournette. That's a sneaky stack this week, by the way, in DFS, because people might look beat at Fournette, but he wants to have a good game in New Orleans. He is a New Orleans native. They're going to ride him quite a bit to win this game, I think, and they're going to get it done with their defense as well. So that's where I'm going. So I'm going to fade Brady this week. He's outside of my top 12. In deeper leagues, of course, you can look at him. But again, after last week at the Cowboys on the road, not too inspiring to put in Brady in this particular game as they ran effectively. I think that continues this week. Now, on the other side with the Saints here and their situation, I'm not going to play James Winston. I get there's some buzz from last week. Really, I can look at Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas, but not going with Chris Olave. The rookie still needs to get more work here, but you're going to have a lot of underneath passes. So a lot of Thomas and Landry on this side, just like we'll have Evans and Jones on the other side for the Buccaneers. So interesting situation here for the Saints passing game. Don't play Taysom Hill. He had one big run and a touchdown last week. The Buccaneers defense are going to be smarter than that. I mean, they really shut down everything the Cowboys did last week. So fade everything except Thomas Landry, and then I would play neither of them higher than a wide receiver 3 this week. Alvin Kamara, he played through an injury. It's concerning that he did that. He wasn't all that effective when he did that a couple of years ago. The Buccaneers' run defense is tough, but you're still Alvin Kamara. You're playing him as an RB2 this week. So, again, fade everything you can as much as possible in this game. The wide receivers will give you some limited value, still playable in this one. Saints D, I'm not playing again. If the Buccaneers are running it, that means not a lot of opportunities there. So I would try to, if you need the Saints D, I think you can get a few sacks out of them, maybe one pick of Brady, but I wouldn't expect a big game. So Buccaneers Saints defense are definitely playable, but I prefer the Bucs in this one for sure. Our final game has the Washington Commanders versus the Detroit Lions. The Commanders are 2.5-point underdogs in this one, 40.5. So we're pushing the total back up in the right direction here this week. So like that situation here. So looking at the Commanders here to really have another good offensive game here. The Lions struggled with everything the Eagles did. So Antonio Gibson is an RB1 this week based on the volume without Brian Robinson. Jahan Dotson, if you need him, play him as a wide receiver 3, but buyer beware. But the Lions secondary is so bad that you can play the outside number 2 receiver. Would fade Curtis Samuel here. I think outside is where it's at for the Lions to exploit here. The Eagles did that plenty within A.J. Brown. So it could be a big Terry McLaurin game. We know that Devonta Smith came up empty in that game, but it was a little bit fluky. So I think there's some value to have in Dotson, but only in deeper leagues as a wide receiver 3. McLaurin slides into wide receiver 1 status this week, along with Gibson being an RB1. Carson Wentz, a nice little streamer this week, a very good matchup at Detroit. So principles for the Commanders, definitely inflated values this week. Not going to play the Commanders D. It's pretty terrible, as we saw against the Jaguars, -1 Chase Young. Now with the Lions, fire him up if you got him for the most part here. DeAndre Swift is an RB1. Love Amon-Ra St. Brown to destroy the Commanders. We saw what Christian Kirk did. He plays the same position in the slot. DFS, cash game play alert. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to have a massive game this week. DJ Chark is playable, much like Dotson if you're in a deeper league as a wide receiver 3. He was involved quite a bit last week. TJ Hawkinson is going to be in a good spot here for the Lions to produce. So play all your Lions principles, extend a little bit. You could stream Jared Goff as well, 2 QB leagues. I like Goff quite a bit this week. You could also, if you're desperate, attach yourself to Jamal Williams as a flex play, because if they're scoring in this game, he's going to get the ball near the goal line. So there's that potential. But again, that's what you're hoping for, touchdown dependent there. I would maybe think about him only in standard leagues here if you're looking for that cheap score. But yeah, fire up all the Commanders and Lions within reason, fade their defenses. This should be another exciting game in Detroit with a lot of points here. So wherever the Lions and Commanders are, points will follow because their defenses stink. And this is the perfect game. Attach yourself a lot to this game in DFS. I think it's going to go over that 48.5. I do like the Lions to rebound and win. Get that Hard Knocks juice going here with Dan Campbell in week number 2. All right, there you have it. There's a breakdown of the first 8 games on the week 2 schedule from a fantasy football perspective. We will do that again for you there. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Our next episode will be the start, sit, and matchup advice for the back half of the schedule, again, all the way through Bears, Packers, Titans, Bills, and Vikings, Eagles. Now make your second listen to the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis you need in less than 30 minutes. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow as we break down more games of week